Engines did not forgive mistakes. They seized, they burned, they failed. But in 1943, one Soviet mechanic found a way to make steel breathe again. Frost settled over the steppe before sunrise. The air was -23 degrees Celsius. The horizon glowed faintly where distant artillery flared. In a trench of packed snow and oil drums, mechanics worked by lantern light around a silent T-34. Steam rose from its open engine deck. Coolant hissed through ruptured pipes. Inside the block, ice mixed with diesel. The smell of glycol and metal hung heavy. At 3:11 hours, the engine stopped for the third time that night. 2nd Guards Tank Brigade, southwest of Kursk. Unit strength, 93 vehicles. Operational, 61. The rest immobilized by mechanical failure before battle. Command reports listed the same defect across regiments: overheating at low speed, coolant loss, pump cavitation. The V2-34 engine produced 840 horsepower when perfect. In mud and frost, it produced half, then died. Among the mechanics was Sergeant Irina Petrovna Volokova, 31, assigned to Field Maintenance Detachment. Born 1912. Novosibirsk. Apprentice machinist before the war. Trained at the Kharkov locomotive plant during evacuation. Transferred to frontline repair unit in late 1942. Rank senior mechanic. Engine section. Task: keep tanks moving. Her hands remained black even after washing. Fingernails ground flat by metal filings. She spoke little. Her notebook contained temperatures, not words. Every engine she touched, she recorded. Cylinder pressure, oil viscosity, coolant flow, exhaust color. She observed what others ignored: the way frost formed around the radiator vents, how steam condensed at idle, how the fan belt glazed when heat spiked. The T-34 was powerful but primitive. Its V2 diesel derived from aircraft prototypes. Aluminum block, 12 cylinders, liquid-cooled. Under combat stress, the cooling system became its weakness. Mud blocked the fins. Snow froze inside the ductwork. At high RPM, the pump drew vapor instead of fluid, forming air pockets that destroyed circulation. Engines overheated, seized, or cracked. Losses mounted not from battle, but from heat. In February 1943, Volokova observed a pattern. Tanks stalled not during attack, but after prolonged idling. The radiators, positioned horizontally above the transmission, trapped heat. At low speed, the fan could not pull enough air. She measured outlet temperature with a simple mercury thermometer, 115 degrees Celsius. Boiling point. She noted the data in her log. Flow insufficient at idle. Recommend deflector modification. No one read her report. Frontline mechanics had no authority for design changes. Orders required vehicles repaired, not improved. But she continued testing. Using scrap steel from destroyed German half-tracks, she cut a small triangular plate, curved it to fit beneath the fan housing, and welded it in place. The deflector angled airflow directly toward the radiator core. She called it obratny život, reverse belly. The device weighed less than 2 kilograms. It changed the air path completely. Next morning, she tested it. Engine start at 6:12. Idle, maintained for 15 minutes. Temperature stabilized at 96 degrees Celsius. No steam. No boil off. At combat throttle, 102. Improvement, 14 degrees. She recorded results, drew a sketch, attached dimensions. Then she installed identical plates on 2 other tanks. When the brigade advanced 3 days later, those 3 machines outlasted the others. Engines ran without failure through 12 hours of movement. Commanders noticed. They asked what she had done. She answered only changed air. Her modification spread informally. By late spring, entire platoons adopted the plate. Mechanics called it the Volokova curve. It required no new materials, only an hour of welding. Temperatures dropped across units. Fuel efficiency rose by 5%. Tank availability improved measurably. Operational readiness from 60 to 75%. No one in Moscow knew why performance improved. Reports reached the People's Commissariat of Tank Industry marked unexplained field improvement in engine reliability. The Design Bureau at Nizhny Tagil requested samples. Volokova prepared a set of drawings on brown paper torn from packaging crates. She labeled each angle precisely. Deflector radius, 70 millimeters. Tilt 15 degrees. Attachment points 3M 8 bolts. The packet sent by courier reached Tagil in June 1943. The engineers there tested it in controlled conditions. Test cell number 4, ambient 22 degrees, altitude equivalent 100 meters, standard V2 engine with and without deflector. Results repeated her field data within margin. Heat reduction 12 degrees. Fuel consumption improved 4%. Fan power requirement reduced by 8. They stamped approval, effective. Recommend standardization. No author credited. Official designation. Cooling deflector plate. AMOD. 1943. Field repair number 47A. The term field repair concealed its origin. Factories began installing the plate on all subsequent production T-34 seconds, without further documentation. Through summer, her brigade fought across the Oral salient toward Bryansk. Dust filled the air. Heat climbed above 30 degrees. Engines strained under load. Her modified tanks continued without failure. Mechanics carried spare plates cut from ammunition crates, welding them into place between battles. Frontline improvisation became standard engineering. In August 1943, during the Battle of Kursk, her brigade's log recorded continuous operation. 18 hours movement, 6 combat engagements, ambient temperature 28 Celsius, engine temperature never exceeded 100 degrees. She marked the data again, in the same notebook, in pencil, dulled by oil. After the battle, her commanding officer submitted a commendation for technical initiative resulting in sustained mobility. The paperwork lost in transit. No citation followed. Recognition was for heroes, not mechanics. Autumn brought mud and rain. She continued maintenance under tarpaulins heavy with water. Each tank she serviced bore the welded curve. Each one carried part of her design. The engines breathed evenly, even when clogged with clay. When others failed, hers kept moving. Factory engineers in Tagil revised production drawings by October. The deflector integrated permanently into the fan housing. Engineering Memo 1224B included it without author. Blueprint stamp read, "Cooling airflow modification per field test recommendation." Serial production resumed. No one mentioned the woman who had first welded it under fire. In December 1943, she was recalled to the rear for consultation with Kharkov Plant No, relocated to Nizhny Tagil during war. She traveled 3 days by train. Snow covered freight wagons. Inside the plant, the noise deafened. Engines ran on test benches day and night. Foreman introduced her simply as the field mechanic from Second Guards. She explained her observations to engineers who listened without expression, took notes, asked no questions. When she finished, they thanked her, collected her notebook, and dismissed her back to the front. She never saw the plant again. In 1944, every new T-34 left the line with her deflector. Factory output 1,200 units per month. Improved cooling reduced engine failures by 1/3. Service reports confirmed increased endurance, extended overhaul intervals, lower fuel use. The data consistent across all fronts. Her notebook remained in Kharkov archives, translated into blueprint form, stripped of name. She received no correspondence, no decoration. She continued repairs until the war ended. When victory came in May 1945, the tank brigades parked their vehicles in lines across the fields of Germany. Engines idled softly, radiators warm, but not boiling. Her design kept them cool, even in the ruined heat of Brandenburg. After demobilization, she returned to Novosibirsk, the city half rebuilt, factories silent. She applied for work at the locomotive plant where she once trained. Application returned stamped personnel file, incomplete. Her military record misfiled. Her rank omitted. No assignment followed. She wrote letters to Tagil requesting acknowledgement for the deflector modification. No reply. Archives already sealed under state industry secrets. Cooling system improvements. T-34-85 program. Her name did not appear. She found occasional work repairing diesel pumps for tractors. Same tools. Smaller scale. The same precision. Now unrecorded. Neighbors knew her only as Irina the mechanic. Her wartime notebook disappeared around 1947 during a housing inspection. Officials searched buildings for hoarded metals and papers. They removed old documents as waste. The thin brown pages that once contained her data never resurfaced. By 1948, when new tank models replaced the T-34, her design remained unchanged in principle. The deflector plate copied into blueprints for T-44 and T-54 engines, refined but identical. Cooling performance continued to define Soviet armor reliability. Her idea lived inside steel, anonymous and permanent. Factories changed names, but the machines continued. Kharkov Plant No. 75 became Malishev Factory. Production lines modernized, blueprints redrawn, archives relocated to state repositories. The original drawing for the cooling deflector plate mod, 1943, existed only as 4D. Under Origin, one word appeared: frontline adaptation. No signature, no author. The post-war Soviet tank industry advanced rapidly. The T-44 entered service, followed by the T-54 in 1947. Both used the same principle of air deflection beneath the fan housing. Engineers described it as optimized airflow through forced induction chamber. The term replaced the field phrase obratny život. By then, Volakova's idea had become geometry, not history. At the Malyshev factory, engineers testing early T-54 prototypes measured operating temperature, 94 degrees Celsius, at continuous load, identical to her frontline data from 4 years earlier. Cooling efficiency, consistent, improvement proven. In technical meetings, younger designers debated minor modifications to the deflector angle. None questioned its origin. She never worked there again. Her employment requests went unanswered. Post-war demobilization left thousands without assignments. Men with medals took positions. Women returned to civilian anonymity. Her service record listed simply mechanic, technical personnel. No note of invention. The years following victory were years of silence. The state required new weapons, not memories. Recognition concentrated on generals, designers, factories. Field engineers became invisible. The archives closed to those without clearance. Her name faded from paperwork as systematically as oil from metal. By 1949, she lived in a single-room flat above a machine shop. Ration cards replaced wages. She repaired bicycle chains and farm tools. Her hands remained scarred, fingers rough from years of work. At night, she sometimes visited the railway yard to help workers restart diesel locomotives frozen by Siberian cold. Engines, large or small, still obeyed her understanding of air and heat. Officially, she ceased to exist in records by 1950. Last appearance: medical card stamped at Novosibirsk Clinic, number 3. Respiratory illness, discharged. No subsequent documentation. For bureaucrats, disappearance equaled completion. No death recorded. No burial known. In the Soviet system, absence required no explanation. Meanwhile, her mechanical lineage endured. When the Korean War began, Soviet-built T-34 seconds fought again in new terrain. Combat reports from the Korean People's Army described reliable engine performance in tropical heat and mountainous cold alike. Average operational time per engine exceeded 400 hours before major overhaul. Cooling performance consistent. Every vehicle carried her plate design, replicated thousands of times across continents. In the 1950s, Soviet technical journals published studies on aerodynamic optimization in armored vehicle engine compartments. Graphs showed airflow vectors identical to her sketches. Equations described pressure differentials matching her 1943 data. Footnotes referenced field data collected during Great Patriotic War, engineer unknown. Her idea had become doctrine. At Kubinka Test Range, near Moscow, military engineers evaluated the T-54's successor, the T-55. Engines pushed, beyond 800 horsepower. Cooling systems remained fundamentally unchanged. When asked during review why airflow arrangement persisted since the 1940s, chief designer replied, "Because it works." No one remembered whose idea it had been. The archives of plant number 75 held thousands of blueprints on film. Roll 22-54 contained one marked cooling deflector plate, field origin. A faint annotation at bottom left read from experience of Stalingrad Kursk front. The handwriting belonged to a draftsman long deceased. It preserved nothing beyond location. By 1960, the Soviet Union produced thousands of tanks annually. Design evolution continued, but fundamental architecture remained. Cooling airflow, angled deflector, fan efficiency, all traced back to that single improvisation beneath a lantern on the frozen steppe. Her deflector became a constant hidden behind steel panels. Decades passed. Engines changed displacement. Tanks grew heavier, but airflow still followed her curve. In 1970, when engineers developed the T-72, they simulated internal aerodynamics using scale models in wind tunnels. The test summary noted, airflow pattern closely resembles configuration, first employed during 1943 field modifications. The pattern unchanged, legacy without lineage. The documents she left behind resurfaced only in the 1990s. After the fall of the Soviet Union, archives opened briefly. Historians reviewing declassified tank industry files found maintenance notes from 2nd Guards Tank Brigade, Kursk Sector, summer 1943. Attached, a single pencil drawing labeled Obratny Zivut, signed, barely legible, Sergeant I.P. Volokova. No further correspondence, no photo, no biography, just the drawing. Triangle of steel, under fan housing. The historian compared the sketch to factory blueprints from later models. Angles identical. The plate she welded in snow had become part of every Soviet tank for half a century. Yet her name never reappeared in design histories. The system had no space for authors outside institutions. Credit belonged to the collective. Innovation erased into uniformity. By then, only a few surviving veterans recalled a woman mechanic in the maintenance crews near Kursk. One described her briefly. Small, quiet, hands always warm from engines even in cold. Another remembered her bending steel with a hammer, not talking. No one knew what became of her after 1945. Modern restorers discovered her mark again decades later. At a museum in Kubinka, engineers dismantling a preserved T-30. For restoration, noticed a deviation in early radiator housings. The deflector curved differently from later models. Under layers of paint, a small stamped letter appeared, V, Cyrillic 5th. Serial patterns suggested the first version handmade before factory standardization. They archived it as prototype deflector, unknown mechanic. Still, the curve matched her 1943 field sketch exactly. Her legacy measured in millimeters, not memories. Angle 15 degrees. Thickness 2 millimeters. Radius 70. Precision uncredited, but enduring. The simplicity of her innovation concealed its magnitude. By redirecting airflow, she extended engine life, reduced fuel consumption, and stabilized performance across climates from Arctic cold to desert heat. The improvement allowed Soviet armor to sustain prolonged offensives without mechanical collapse. An act of maintenance became a strategic advantage. Military historians later calculated that by reducing mechanical attrition, the modification effectively increased Soviet armored strength by 10% during the Kursk offensive, a war outcome influenced by a curve of steel welded in the dark. But archives recorded numbers, not individuals. Her name, absent from every table. The T-34 became symbol of Soviet power, mass-produced icon of victory. Museums displayed them worldwide. Visitors saw armor thickness, gun caliber, engine type. None saw the air inside, the controlled movement she designed, the quiet engineering that let metal endure fire. In the late 1990s, Russian engineers restoring a wartime for parade service replicated her deflector again. Fabricated from new steel, welded in place by technicians unaware they repeated her gesture. During test run, engine temperature steady 98 degrees Celsius. Stable, reliable, unchanged after half a century. The test report, identical to hers. Technology evolved. Her logic remained. Modern diesel engines used computer-controlled fans, thermostats, sensors, but the fundamental truth persisted. Air must move cleanly across heat. Her plate embodied that principle. Steel simplicity replacing complexity. Every tank built after 1943 carried within it a trace of her intelligence, shaped by necessity, preserved by repetition. No patent, no monument, no grave, only the curve beneath the fan. Unknown, indispensable. Her disappearance mirrored the system that consumed her. In a country built on collective effort, the individual vanished by design. Yet the machines she repaired outlived ideologies. Her work survived where memory failed. Today, historians examining production archives recognize patterns of anonymous invention scattered across Soviet industry. Among them, a field mechanic whose deflector altered engineering practice from the ground up. Her contribution identified only through temperatures, blueprints, and the geometry of airflow. Evidence without narrative. Fact without fame. The preserved tanks still function on demonstration fields. Engines start with a deep diesel pulse. Air flows through the same deflector, past radiators that never boil. The sound carries across grass and concrete, a steady breathing of metal. It is the sound she created. There are no photographs of her face, no recorded words, only the certainty of design that still performs its duty. Her act existed once, repeated endlessly by machines that never stopped. No inscription marks her place in history, but every engine running at safe temperature remains her silent archive. In engineering terms, perfection is invisibility. When a mechanism works, it disappears into function. Her work achieved that absolute state. It required no recognition, no maintenance, no repair, only operation. Records close in 1950, with one final notation in the Malyshev factory archives. Cooling system efficiency stable since 1943 modification. No further changes necessary. No further information available. The deflector she welded in the dark remained unchanged for generations. The tanks that carried it fought in wars she never saw, across landscapes she never knew. Each one, a moving monument to precision achieved under fire. She was never credited again. Her deflector plate remained in every T-34 built after 1943. Her name did not.